Welcome to my presentation on Comprehensive Musicianship Through Performance, a critical analysis through an abolitionist lens by Robert Lark. I would like to start by stating that my positionality is that of a straight white man who grew up in a middle-class Chicago suburb, and I live my life through that lens. The Comprehensive Musicianship Through Performance model began with a group of 8 nominated teachers coming from middle school and high school band and choir who got together to discuss and deeply analyze their own teaching and figure out a way to improve their programs. The following are listed as significant events that influenced the CMP project. The Contemporary Music Project expanded on the Young Composers Project from 1959, which placed composers in public schools to compose for their ensembles and emphasized student involvement in the compositions. The Manhattanville Music Curriculum Project sought to broaden the musical experience for students through development of a sequential curriculum and emphasized having workshops for music teachers. The Yale Seminar stated the need to broaden student repertoire and stressed creating a more comprehensive musical education. The Tanglewood Symposium emphasized placing music at the center of the school curriculum and stressed paying attention to the musical needs of individual students and once again broadening the types of music studied in the classroom. These events are a great place to help understand what influenced the teachers who founded this model and what their belief system was going into CMP's creation. These 8 teachers also came up with the following beliefs that they all had in common when creating this new teaching framework and served as the model for the entire CMP framework. These beliefs are: 1. Musical independence as a performer, creator, and responder is an important outcome for students in performance classes. 2. Careful planning for instruction leads to more comprehensive, meaningful student learning. 3. Rehearsals utilizing a variety of educational strategies and environments can increase in-depth learning about music. 4. The quality of music selected affects the breadth and lasting impact of learning. 5. Assessment of learning by teachers and students is essential at all stages of the experience, both before, during, and after. And finally, comprehensive teaching, where students take initiative for their own learning, often produces creative results that exceed expectations. These beliefs led to the creation of the CMP model, which they label a planning model of teaching and not a curriculum, in order to offer the flexibility that teachers needed to adapt ideas to their own strengths, their unique teaching needs, and to the nature of their students, communities, and ensembles. The CMP planning model is symbolized by a 5-point star. The points labeled assessment, selection, analysis, outcomes, and strategies. The design of the star is intentional, as the CMP model stresses that you can begin your preparation within this framework from any point on the star that feels best for your ensemble and the music currently being worked on in your class. Comprehensive musicianship through performance is designed for the classroom to take a very deep dive into these 5-star aspects. A thorough analysis must be done on the piece of music being performed, everything from background information, musical elements, and the heart or purpose of the piece. It also details skill, knowledge, and effective outcomes, dozens of different strategies for achieving success in different ways, several ways of assessing the students, and input into the musical selection process. After looking into lesson plan rubrics and other additional CMP information, the CMP model leaves so much room for teachers to adapt this lesson to fit any classroom or situation, with the opportunity to have a CMP model that has intense, thorough analysis, student evaluation, student-centered input and creativity, and connection to the outside world and students' everyday lives. Or it could just as easily have a very shallow investment into these 5 sides of the teaching model, or something in between. It is a clear takeaway that this model can be whatever the teacher chooses to make of it, and could just as easily be used to reinforce bad and hurtful habits as it could be used to transform an old school style ensemble into a class that truly meets the creative musical needs of a diverse group of musicians. It is here that I take a look at everything leading up to and what eventually becomes this CMP model through an abolitionist teaching lens, as described by Bettina Love in her book, We Want to Do More. Love describes abolitionist teaching as a vast multitude of things, including being, quote, about tearing down old structures and ways of thinking, forming new ideas, new forms of social interactions, ways to be inclusive, to discuss inequality and distribute wealth and resources, to resist, to agitate, new ways to maintain order and safety, and so on. Parts of CMP certainly have roots in certain parts of abolitionist teaching. These events all seek to innovate new ways of structuring music education. They seek to tear down old, obviously problematic pedagogies for making music and centering students with the creation and selection of the music itself. However, CMP seems to mostly focus on broad music concepts like song selection, form, and themes that, through their vagueness, fail to address core issues that caused previous teaching models before CMP to also fail students. This model does not properly address learning to understand, respect, and celebrate student differences of students through genuine connection. Nor does it talk about connecting the music to their lives in everyday practical ways, connections to the emotions we all feel as humans, and connections to the systematically oppressive ways the world tries to keep down those not in position of power and people of color. The CMP model attempts to right a wrong and provides a framework that could be used to do real good, but fails to specifically call out and address the racial and systematic oppressive forces that got us to where we are today in education, and seems to avoid most topics that don't deal directly with music or the classroom, although whiteness and the need to take action to eliminate it from education is inseparable from the classroom and from music. It's through this abolitionist teaching mindset that I'm reminded of a reading by Stacey Lee on the Hmong student population in the high school she studied, where some teachers recognized a disparity that exists and many proposed solutions, some that could even work if done with the correct intention. However, the fundamental refusal to call out the real problem in the first place, being that the school was not set up for the Hmong or other racial minorities to succeed, meant that the school could never begin to truly solve a problem that they failed to name out loud. Juliet Hess also touched on something incredibly related to this flaw in CMP's design when she discussed the pop music ensemble initiative in music education today. She discussed the promise and great value in offering a modern, creatively student-centered ensemble that is more relevant to student interest, but pointed out that it can easily lead to a new hegemony under a different name, a class that only performs covers of the same white musicians from the same corner of the world from the same couple of decades. What is on its own an excellent idea with great promise easily becomes the same problematic teaching they sought to solve without a critical lens and consistent effort to act on that lens on the part of the teacher. The CMP model is something I will absolutely use in my classroom. The model sets teachers up to be prepared and successful in class and pushes students to be at the center of the learning and to go beyond the simple typewriter mechanics typically found in ensembles where students learn fingerings, rhythms, and little else. However, because the CMP model does not directly connect any of its teachings to the society and realities of its students, especially the most vulnerable of the classroom population, it fails to name the very problem it tries to solve. It is so easy for CMP or anything to perpetuate the same problematic, detrimental, and even soul-murdering practices seen devaluing students' identities and their connection to society. This doesn't have to happen through an act of maliciousness that would make the evening news. It often happens just through a lack of effort or attentiveness. It could even be said to be, in most people of privilege, our default setting if we are not thoughtful enough to actively have a holistic classroom, something I think the CMP model is guilty of. The CMP framework is just a tool, although I believe it to be a very good and useful tool, but one which can be used to great success or perpetuating a white-centered classroom, depending on how it's implemented. It's quite easy for the CMP model to end up with students that know everything about how to make sound on an instrument, but understand very little about themselves and their place in a challenging world, which I believe is an absolute requirement to being a musician. James Baldwin is a phenomenal writer and activist who deserves his own discussion, but his quote here is specifically, and it's especially insightful when analyzing this music education model with this lens. He says, "Because I love you, it is my job to show you what you cannot see." It is not enough for us to show love to our students through opening their eyes to things unseen. We need to also be ready and open to seeing and seeking out the truth, which from our places of various privilege may include oppression and pain that we have never experienced. But they are truths that some of our students have lived with for their entire lives, and they need to be seen in the light of day for us to teach from a place of love.